Imagine walking down the aisle, heart pounding with love, only to discover that your choice of spouse could technically land you in a jail cell. Love might be blind, but the law is definitely watching, and some of these regulations are so absurd you'll wonder if the legislators were drinking on the job. From forbidden fruit to mandatory coffee, we're counting down the absolute strangest marriage laws that actually exist. Trust us, it gets weird. 1. If you think your in-laws are cold-blooded, try being the mayor of San Pedro Huamalula in Mexico. Every year, as part of a ritual that carries the weight of local law, the mayor must marry a crocodile. The reptile, wearing a tiny bridal gown, represents a princess from indigenous legend. This ceremony is legally and culturally required to ensure prosperity and a good harvest for the town. It's the only wedding in the world where the most important part of the ceremony is making sure the bride's mouth is safely taped shut before the kiss. 2. Cambodia decided that love has a very specific price tag and a strict expiration date, at least for foreigners. The government passed a law banning foreign men over the age of 50 from marrying Cambodian women. But wait, it gets even more bureaucratic. Even if you're under 50, you still have to prove you earn at least $2,500 a month. They essentially turned the entire country into a high-end dating app with a built-in filter for old and broke. It's the state's way of preventing sugar daddy scenarios, making financial stability a literal requirement for romance. 3. According to some interpretations of ancient Jewish law in the Talmud, a man could legally divorce his wife if she simply ruined his dinner. If the soup was too salty or the bread was burnt, that was considered a valid legal ground to end the marriage. It's the ultimate Gordon Ramsay approach to family law. 4. You might think of cheating as a personal betrayal, but in Oklahoma, the state considers it a major crime against the public. Adultery is technically a felony in the Sooner state, punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a hefty fine. While the police aren't exactly kicking down bedroom doors every Friday night, the law remains on the books as a silent, judgmental threat. It turns a bad relationship decision into a potential prison sentence that stays on your record forever. Does the government really belong in our bedrooms? Or should we leave the cheating scandals to the tabloid magazines and talk shows? 5. Ancient Athens didn't just care about your heart, they cared about your civic duty. A law allowed men to be prosecuted for the crime of not getting married. To the state, being a lifelong bachelor was seen as dodging the duty to produce the next generation of citizens. Stay single too long, and you faced heavy fines or lost social standing. The government decided that finding the one wasn't a personal choice, but a legal requirement for the city's survival. Imagine explaining your dating app failures to a jury just to avoid a massive fine for being single. 6. In some parts of India, there is a deep-seated belief that a person born under the Manglik astrological sign is cursed and will cause their spouse an early death. The legal and cultural solution? The person must first marry a tree, usually a banana or peepal tree, or even a clay pot. After the wedding, the tree is destroyed, effectively killing the first spouse and breaking the curse. Only then can the human wedding proceed. It is a literal loophole for fate, proving that if you want to marry the love of your life, you might have to break a few branches first. 7. In Saudi Arabia, the bond of marriage can apparently be broken by a bad cup of joe. Traditionally, a woman could use her husband's failure to provide her with fresh coffee as a valid reason for divorce. In a culture where coffee is a cornerstone of hospitality and daily life, denying your spouse their caffeine fix was seen as a form of neglect. It's the only place on earth where being a bad barista is a legal liability. If your partner forgot your morning latte every single day, would you consider that a deal breaker or just a minor annoyance? 8. Alabama law takes keeping it in the family very seriously, but with a weird twist. You are legally forbidden from marrying your step-parent, even if there is absolutely no blood relation and your biological parent has passed away. The state views the legal bond of a step-family as an unbreakable barrier to romance. It's a law designed to prevent incest-adjacent situations that would make a family reunion incredibly awkward. Even if you met your stepmom for the first time when you were 30, the state says she's officially off-limits forever. 9. Until 2015, South Korea had a dedicated adultery police unit. Seriously. Cheating was a criminal offense that could land you in jail for 2 years. Private investigators made a fortune helping spouses catch their partners in the act so the police could swoop in and make an arrest. It led to dramatic scenes of officers raiding love motels with cameras flashing, looking for evidence under the sheets. When the Constitutional Court finally struck the law down, they argued that the state has no business interfering in people's private lives. It was the end of an era where a one-night stand required a legal defense team and a getaway car. 10. In Massachusetts, a legendary old rule, often called the brothel law, made it illegal for more than 3 unrelated people to live together in the same apartment. The logic was that any group of women living together without a husband or father must be running an illegal business. It effectively made roommating a crime for unmarried couples and students. Do you think the government should have any say in who sleeps under your roof? Or is that the ultimate overreach of power? 11. In Utah, the law is very specific about your wedding attire, and it has nothing to do with the color of your dress. It is technically illegal to get married while wearing a mask. This wasn't designed to stop superhero weddings. It was an old rule meant to prevent people from hiding their identities to trick others into marriage, or to commit fraud at a masquerade ball. So if you were planning a Batman-themed ceremony, you'll have to unmask before you say, "I do." It's a law that basically ensures you actually know whose hand you're holding at the altar. 12. If you think your wedding night is going to be a relaxing getaway, you clearly aren't part of the Tidong people in Indonesia. There, a strictly observed custom, often treated with the weight of law, forbids the bride and groom from using the bathroom for 3 whole days after the ceremony. They believe that breaking this fast brings terrible luck, like a broken marriage or the death of children. The couple is watched closely and given very little food and water to help them survive the ordeal. Could you handle 72 hours of marital bliss without a single trip to the restroom? Or would that be a literal deal-breaker for you? 13. In Fiji, a simple diamond ring might not be enough to impress your future father-in-law. To officially ask for a woman's hand in marriage, the groom is often expected to present the father of the bride with a tabua, which is a literal whale's tooth. In Fijian culture, these teeth are incredibly valuable and symbolize wealth and social status. While it's more of a powerful tradition than a government statute, it functions as a mandatory social law. It turns the romantic gesture of a proposal into a high-stakes scavenger hunt for a piece of a deep-sea giant. 14. Most people want their marriage to be easy, but in Louisiana, you can choose to make it legally extra hard. The state offers something called a covenant marriage. When you sign up for this, you are legally agreeing to much stricter rules. You have to go to premarital counseling, and if you ever want a divorce, you are required to go through even more counseling and wait for a much longer separation period than a normal couple. It's the government's way of letting you superglue your relationship. It's essentially a hard mode for commitment that you can't just quit when things get tough. 15. In Gambia, the law reminds you that no matter how old you are, you're still a child in the eyes of your parents. Even if a woman is 40 years old, independent and successful, she still technically needs the formal consent of her father to get married. If the father isn't around, the authority passes down to a male relative. It's a legal system where asking for permission isn't a polite tradition. It's a mandatory bureaucratic requirement. It places the keys to a woman's romantic future firmly in the hands of the men in her family tree. 16. England still honors a tradition called reading the banns, and it's a legal requirement for many church weddings. For 3 consecutive Sundays before the wedding, the minister must publicly announce the couple's intent to marry during the service. This gives the entire community a chance to shout out any legal reasons why the marriage shouldn't happen. It's like a 3-week-long speak now or forever hold your peace period. It's a slow-motion legal process that turns your private engagement into a public, three-part miniseries for the local congregation. 17. There is an old, dusty rule in Oregon that supposedly makes it illegal for a man to whisper "sweet nothings" into his wife's ear while they are in church. While the police aren't exactly patrolling the pews with microphones, the law stems from strict Puritan-era standards of public behavior. The idea was that the church was for focusing on the divine, not on your spouse's romantic whispers. It turns a tiny moment of affection into a technical disturbance of the peace. It makes you wonder what kind of scandalous whispering was going on to make the city council step in. 18. In parts of South Sudan, the law recognizes something called a ghost marriage. If a groom dies before he can get married, his brother can step in and marry the woman in the dead man's name. Any children born from this union are legally considered the children of the deceased brother, ensuring his family line continues even from the grave. It's a hauntingly beautiful, yet legally complex way of dealing with tragedy. It ensures that even death doesn't have the final word on who belongs in which family or who inherits the family land. 19. Vietnam has a very specific legal stance on the supernatural side of romance. It is technically illegal to use sorcery or spells to influence a marriage or cause a divorce. The law targets scammers who promise to use magic to win back an ex or break up a rival couple. It's the government's way of saying that while love is magical, you can't use actual magic to manipulate the legal status of a relationship. If someone offered to cast a love spell on your crush for $100, would you consider it a harmless joke or a criminal scam that needs a law to stop it? 20. If you want to marry a foreigner in Switzerland, be prepared for a very awkward first date with the government. To prevent marriages of convenience for citizenship, the state often conducts intensive interviews with the couple. They might ask you what color your spouse's toothbrush is, what side of the bed they sleep on, or what you ate for dinner 3 nights ago. If your answers don't match, the government can legally block the wedding. It turns the getting to know you phase of a relationship into a high-stakes interrogation where a wrong answer could lead to deportation. 21. In Brazil, you have a very short return policy on your spouse. Under the civil code, a marriage can be annulled if one person discovers a significant mistake regarding the other's identity or character, like discovering they have a criminal record or a disgraceful secret. But you only have 10 days to realize it. It's like a romantic version of a 10-day free trial. If you don't find the defect in the first week and a half, the government basically says, "Sorry, no refunds, you're stuck with them." 22. In Rhode Island, if you decide to marry someone who is serving a life sentence in prison, your marriage is legally considered civilly dead. This means the state treats the prisoner as if they don't exist legally, making the marriage void from the start. It's the ultimate forbidden love scenario, where the government literally deletes your relationship status the moment you sign the paper. It's a harsh way to ensure that "until death do us part" starts exactly when the cell door locks. 23. Turkey only recently fixed a law that caused decades of frustration for women. For years, the law strictly forbade a woman from using only her maiden name after marriage. She was legally forced to take her husband's name or use both. It took a massive, years-long battle in the Constitutional Court to finally rule that this was a violation of women's rights. For millions of people, your own name, your very identity, was something the state claimed the right to change the moment you said "I do." It's a reminder that even the simplest things like your name can be a legal battlefield. 24. In Israel, marriage isn't handled by a city hall but by religious courts. For Jewish couples, this means a Cohen, a member of the priestly class, is legally forbidden from marrying a woman who has been divorced. It doesn't matter how much they love each other. The religious law, which is backed by the state, treats the union as a violation of ancient purity rules. It's a modern legal system enforcing a rule that's thousands of years old. If your family bloodline stopped you from marrying the person you loved, would you change your name, your religion, or your entire country? 25. Inflation hits everything, even love. In the Imo state of Nigeria, the government actually stepped in to regulate the bride price. Families were asking for so much money, cars, and livestock that young men couldn't afford to get married. The law set a maximum limit on how much a groom has to pay the bride's family to keep things fair. It's a rare case of the government acting as a romantic price control agency, trying to make sure that happily ever after doesn't require a bank heist to pay off your new in-laws. 26. In Togo, there is a traditional practice that sometimes carries the weight of local law where a man can claim a bride by essentially kidnapping her. While modern national laws are fighting hard against it, for a long time, if a man took a woman to his house, her family might consider them legally married. It's a terrifyingly literal take on taking a bride, where the concept of a first date is replaced by a forced relocation. It's a grim reminder that in some corners of the world, ancient traditions can still overshadow modern concepts of individual consent. 27. In France, the law requires you to publish your intent to marry at the local town hall for at least 10 days before the ceremony. This notice, called the publication of bans, must be physically posted on a board for everyone in the neighborhood to see. It's the original Facebook relationship status update, but it's mandatory and controlled by the government. If you try to skip this 10-day public announcement, your wedding is legally invalid and the state won't recognize your union. 28. Italy has a cooling-off period for widows that would make a marathon runner tired. A woman must wait exactly 300 days after her husband's death or a divorce before she can legally remarry. This ancient rule exists to ensure there's no confusion about the paternity of any potential children from the previous marriage. It's a law that treats a woman's life like a biological clock that the government needs to reset before she can enter a new contract. It's basically a state-mandated mourning period enforced by the Department of Health. 29. In Turkmenistan, the government once decided that marrying a local woman was a luxury only the rich could afford. Any foreigner who wanted to say "I do" had to pay the state a massive $50,000 insurance fee. The official reason was to provide for children if the foreigner ever left, but it was essentially a high-priced paywall for love. It turned a wedding invitation into a bank-breaking invoice, proving that sometimes the state really is the ultimate romantic gatekeeper. 30. Even if you're an adult in the Philippines, the law still wants you to check in with mom and dad. If you are between the ages of 21 and 25, you are legally required to seek parental advice before getting a marriage license. If you don't get a written statement from your parents saying they've given you their wisdom, the government makes you wait an extra 3 months before you can get married. It's a state-enforced timeout, designed to make sure you've really listened to your parents' warnings before you sign your life away. 31. In Mississippi, the state takes a very firm stance on how many people you're allowed to love, and even how many you're allowed to talk about. It is actually a felony to teach or preach the doctrine of polygamy. It's not just illegal to have multiple wives, it's illegal to even try to convince someone it's a good idea. You could technically face prison time just for giving a persuasive speech about having a bigger family. It's a law that treats a controversial opinion on marriage like a dangerous conspiracy against the state. 32. In Missouri, the law has a very awkward way of saying "not yet" to people wanting to move on. You are legally prohibited from finalizing a divorce if the wife is currently pregnant. It doesn't matter if the marriage is a total disaster or if the baby isn't even the husband's. The state forces you to stay legally bound until the child is born. It turns the delivery room into a legal finish line. Does the government have a right to put your life on hold just because a baby is on the way, or is this the ultimate overreach into personal freedom? 33. In Israel, the process of getting a divorce for Jewish couples involves a document called a get. Under the law, a woman cannot be divorced unless her husband physically and voluntarily hands her this document. If the husband refuses, the woman becomes an aguna, or a chained wife. She is legally stuck in a marriage that doesn't exist in reality, unable to move on or remarry. It's a legal system that gives one person absolute power over the other's future, creating a heartbreaking scenario where love has ended. but the contract is a permanent cage. 34. In Tajikistan, the government had to pass a specific law to stop a bizarre modern crisis: the SMS divorce. It had become a massive social issue where men working abroad would simply text the word talak 3 times to their wives to legally end the marriage via a text message. The state finally had to step in and rule that a digital breakup text is not a valid way to dissolve a family, requiring men to actually show up in court instead. It's a law that proves, while technology moves fast, the government still demands that a game over for your marriage happens in person, not in a green bubble. 35. If you get married in certain regions of Spain, like Catalonia, your marriage contract comes with a mandatory equality clause. The law literally requires the couple to share domestic responsibilities and the care of children or elderly relatives. It's not just a nice idea. It's a legal obligation written into the civil code. If one spouse refuses to pick up a vacuum or help with the dishes, they are technically in breach of their marital contract. It's the only place on earth where being a slacker at home is a violation of the law. 36. Malaysia has a set of laws known as Kalwat, which makes Netflix and chill a very high-stakes gamble. Sharia police have the authority to raid hotel rooms or private apartments if they suspect an unmarried Muslim couple is in close proximity. If you aren't married or closely related by blood, being caught behind closed doors together is a criminal offense. It turns a private date into a potential public scandal and a trip to court. It's a legal system where the government acts as the ultimate chaperone, watching your every move. 37. California offers a very mysterious option for couples who value their privacy above all else: the confidential marriage. Unlike a standard wedding, this license is not a public record. No one can look it up, and you don't even need witnesses to stand with you at the ceremony. It's the perfect legal loophole for celebrities or anyone who wants to be married in the eyes of the law while keeping the rest of the world in the dark. It's a state-sanctioned way to have a secret life, proving that sometimes the government is actually good at keeping a secret. 38. Nepal once introduced a very controversial financial incentive to encourage social change. The government offered a cash grant to any man who married a widow. The goal was to reduce the social stigma widows faced, but critics argued it turned marriage into a business transaction and put women at risk of being married for the money. It essentially put a bounty on a specific type of relationship. Would you be comfortable with the government paying people to date a certain group of people? Or is that taking social engineering way too far? 39. In ancient Ireland, there was a brilliant tradition at the Fair of Telltown that functioned like a subscription service for marriage. Couples could get married for exactly 1 year and 1 day. If the relationship wasn't working out by the time the fair returned the next year, they could simply walk away from each other. No lawyers, no paperwork, and no drama. All they had to do was walk to the center of the fair and walk in opposite directions. It was a trial marriage that was legally and socially accepted long before the modern world invented the prenup. 40. In Thailand, there's an old-school morality law that makes it technically illegal for a man to be inappropriately dressed while driving a car, which means you must wear a shirt. While this applies to everyone, it was originally used to target couples looking for a bit of privacy in their vehicles. The government effectively banned shirtless romance behind the wheel, turning a hot summer drive into a potential ticket for indecency. It's the law that proves the Thai police are the ultimate fashion critics of the road. 41. In some legal systems, there were marriage cleanses crime rules where a perpetrator of sexual violence could try to escape punishment by marrying the victim. Many countries have abolished these laws, but their existence is a brutal reminder that some courts treated a marriage certificate like a legal eraser instead of protection. 42. In Hong Kong, a legendary legal loophole sounds like it's straight out of a movie. If a wife catches her husband being unfaithful, an ancient rule suggests she can take direct physical retribution, but only with her bare hands. No weapons, no poison, and zero outside help. The state essentially implies that if you're angry enough to handle it manually without tools, they might look the other way. It turns a domestic betrayal into a bizarre, high-stakes standoff where the government stays out only if the confrontation remains strictly unplugged. 43. In Uzbekistan, the government doesn't just want you to be in love, they want to see your blood work. Before a couple can get a marriage license, they must undergo mandatory medical checkups for HIV, tuberculosis, and even mental health stability. If you don't pass the state's physical exam, your wedding plans are legally dead on arrival. It's the ultimate way for the government to ensure that only vetted citizens are allowed to start families. Would you be willing to share your entire medical history with a government clerk just to get a wedding ring? 44. If you want to end your marriage in Singapore, you better be prepared for a very long wait. To get a no-fault divorce based on separation, you have to prove you've lived apart for 3 years. And if your spouse doesn't agree to the split, that waiting period jumps to 4 years. The government essentially forces you into a years-long cool-down period where you're legally stuck in a relationship that's already over. It's a marathon of patience that makes sure you've really, truly tried everything before the state lets you walk away. 45. In several regions of Indonesia, getting married is actually good for the planet. To get your marriage license, the law requires you to plant a certain number of trees. If you decide to get divorced later, you might be forced to plant even more. It's a brilliant way to turn domestic drama into environmental restoration. Imagine the fight. I want a divorce. Fine, but you better get your shovel because we owe the government 10 mahogany trees before we can sign these papers. 46. In Mississippi, there is an old law that technically forbids anyone who is weak-minded or insane from getting married. While it was intended to prevent the exploitation of vulnerable people, the vague wording gave the state massive power to decide who was smart enough to fall in love. It turned the local marriage bureau into a judge of intelligence and mental health. It's a leftover from an era where the government thought it could legislate who was capable of feeling love based on an IQ test or a doctor's opinion. 47. In Egypt, a woman can legally end her marriage through a process called khula, but it's essentially a buyout clause. To get a divorce without proving fault, she must pay back her entire dowry and waive all her financial rights. The state effectively puts a price tag on her freedom, turning a human right into a high-stakes financial negotiation. It's a system where the cost of a divorce is literally everything you own, making the exit from a bad marriage a luxury that many simply can't afford. 48. Japan has recently seen a rise in what's called the silent divorce in its courtrooms. Judges are now granting divorces based solely on a total lack of communication between spouses. If a husband gives his wife the silent treatment for years, the law views it as a form of mental cruelty that invalidates the marriage contract. It's the government's way of saying that if you stop speaking to your partner, you've legally stopped being their spouse. Do you think the silent treatment should be a criminal offense, or is that just part of being in a long-term relationship? 1. In Japan, if a woman gets divorced, the law forces her to take a 100-day cooling-off period before she can remarry. A man? He is free to walk out of the courthouse and into another chapel that same afternoon. This law isn't about giving women time to think. It is an old rule from the 1800s designed to avoid paternity confusion before DNA tests existed. It is a discriminatory law that punishes women for a biological problem that modern science solved decades ago. Yet the rule remains stubbornly stuck in the past. 2. In Scotland, if you show up to your own wedding wasted, the whole thing can be cancelled on the spot. The law gives the person running the ceremony the power to say no if they think you are too drunk to understand what is happening. It makes total sense for legal consent, but just imagine the embarrassment. You invite all your friends, buy the dress, and spend thousands of dollars, only to get sent home by the judge because you had a little too much liquid courage before the vows. 3. Somalia technically says you must be 18 to marry, but there is a massive, scary exception. A girl can be married as young as 10 if she shows signs of growing up and gives her consent. The idea that a 10-year-old, who should be playing with toys, can truly understand and agree to a lifelong marriage is crazy. It is a harsh reminder that not all laws on this list are funny. Some are just tragic loopholes that put kids in real danger. 4. Thinking about doing a prank proposal for a funny video? Do not try that in South Carolina. Under their morality laws, if you are over 16 and propose marriage without actually meaning it, you are committing a crime. The state has basically made it illegal to be a flake in romance. It is a government-forced no-take-backs rule. If you get down on one knee, you better have a ring and a real plan. Otherwise, you could actually end up facing a judge. 5. In Hartford, Connecticut, Sunday isn't just for resting, it is for keeping your hands off your wife. An old-school law makes it illegal for a husband to kiss his wife on Sundays. This comes from strict religious times when they wanted people focused on church, not romance. It turns a simple Sunday morning kiss into a crime. You have to wonder if neighbors were actually looking through windows, ready to call the cops on a couple for showing a little affection on the weekend. 6. Utah has a very weird rule for marrying your first cousin. It is usually banned unless you are both over the age of 65. Basically, the state looked at the science and said, if you are too old to have babies, it's not our problem anymore. They also allow it if you are over 55 and can't have kids. It is the most unromantic way for the government to say, go ahead, your DNA is too old to cause problems, so knock yourselves out. 7. Japan has a strict law that causes a lot of arguments. Married couples must have the exact same last name. In real life, this means 96% of women are forced to drop their own name when they get married. It is an old rule that makes you choose between getting married and keeping your own identity. While people change names in other places too, Japan is the only big modern country where the law forces you to pick just one name for the whole family. 8. Kentucky believes in second chances, but they draw a hard line at the fourth. It is actually illegal to remarry the same person 4 times. You can marry, divorce, and remarry that same crazy ex 3 times, but on the 4th try, the state steps in. They basically act like a concerned best friend, taking away your marriage license and saying, "No way, we are not doing this again." It is the only time the government actually stops you from making the same mistake forever. 9. If a Saudi man wants to marry a woman from another country, he doesn't just need love, he needs government permission. The rules are intense. He must be between 40 and 65 and submit a huge stack of papers, including a note from the mayor proving he isn't sick. The government treats international love less like a fairy tale and more like a security risk. They wrap the whole process in so much red tape that it makes getting married feel like filing your taxes. 10. The state of Washington has a cold, harsh law that makes it illegal to marry a pauper, which means anyone who relies on government help for money. This wasn't about love. It was a money rule to stop poor people from moving there, marrying a local, and getting on welfare. It basically put a price tag on marriage. The law says that if you are broke, you don't just lose your money, you lose your right to walk down the aisle. 11. Let's look at perhaps the single dumbest marriage law in history, outlawing an annoying wife. Until 1972 in New Jersey, a woman could be arrested and charged as a common scold. Basically, if you argued too much, yelled, or nagged your husband, the police could legally get involved. The government actually gave itself the power to judge the tone of your marriage. Imagine the cops showing up at your door just because you asked your husband to take out the trash 3 times in a row. It turned normal family arguments into a criminal record. 12. In Minnesota, your romantic life depends entirely on your breath. There is an old rule that makes it illegal for a man to have sex with his wife if he smells like garlic, onions, or sardines. Honestly, this is just good advice for anyone. But the fact that it is a law is crazy. Someone actually took the time to write a legal code to protect people's noses. It is the only law in the world where having bad breath isn't just a mood killer, It is technically a crime against the state. 13. In most places, if your spouse cheats on you, you just get mad or get a divorce. But in states like North Carolina, you can actually sue the other person for cash. It is a law called alienation of affection. Basically, you can take your spouse's lover to court for stealing their love away from you. Juries have awarded millions of dollars in these cases. It is a wild legal system where you can literally put a price tag on your broken heart and make the homewrecker pay the bill. 14. In Samoa, forgetting your wife's birthday isn't just a mistake that lands you on the couch. It is actually a crime. An old law makes it illegal for a husband to forget that special date. While the police probably aren't raiding homes looking for missing birthday cards, the fact that the government had to make a law about this is hilarious. It is the only place on earth where being a bad listener is against the law. If you don't buy flowers, you might technically be a criminal. 15. You might be married right now and not even know it. In Kansas, they still recognize common law marriage, and the rules are hilariously vague. You don't need a certificate. You just have to act like you are married in public. What does that actually mean? Sharing a bank account? Introducing them as the wifey at a party? You could accidentally end up legally bound for life without ever walking down an aisle or signing a single piece of paper. It is a marriage trap waiting to happen. 16. Most people think the minimum marriage age is 18, but Massachusetts has a shocking loophole. Technically, there is no minimum age requirement written in the law. If a judge and the parents agree, a child of any age could legally get married. Yes, even a 12-year-old. It is a scary leftover rule from a different time that somehow hasn't been fixed yet. It means that child marriage isn't just something that happens in distant history books. It is a terrifying legal possibility right here in modern America. 17. In Australia, the law tries to save you from your own bad decisions. A marriage can be completely cancelled if one person was so drunk during the ceremony that they didn't know what they were doing. The law specifically mentions habitual drunkards, which implies this isn't a one-time thing. It is basically the legal system stepping in to say, look, you were clearly seeing double, so we aren't going to let you make a lifelong commitment while you are wearing beer goggles. 18. If you get married in South Africa, you better trust your partner's spending habits completely. The default rule there is community of property. This means the second you say "I do," every penny you own and every dollar of debt you have gets mixed into one big pot. If you don't sign a special contract beforehand, your spouse's bad credit score instantly becomes your nightmare. You aren't just marrying a person, you are legally marrying their student loans and credit card bills. 19. What is the weirdest reason for a divorce? In Kuwait, it can actually be a dog. Because of strict religious interpretations, courts have granted divorces to women because their husbands refuse to get rid of a pet dog. Since dogs can be considered unclean in this context, keeping one inside made it impossible for the wife to pray properly at home. It is a rare legal case where the ultimatum, "It is either me or the dog," actually held up in a real court of law. 20. Florence. Italy is famous for art, but it also has a weird rule about health. It is technically illegal for anyone with a contagious disease to even enter the city limits. So, if you catch a bad cold or the flu on your honeymoon, you could theoretically be banned from seeing the Statue of David. It is an ancient rule meant to stop serious plagues, but it was never removed. Now, it just means a runny nose could turn your romantic trip into an immigration crisis. 21. In Vermont, there is a law that once required women to get a signed permission slip from their husbands just to get false teeth. Think about how crazy that is. A woman's dental health, or at least her smile, was completely under the control of her spouse. It is a leftover rule from a time when husbands legally owned their wives' bodies and belongings. Would you want to ask your partner for permission to visit the dentist? It is a hilarious and slightly scary piece of legal history. 22. Here is a law that sounds like it was written by a divorce lawyer trying to make money. In New Mexico, there is an old and weird rule that technically forbids married couples from censoring each other's books. Specifically, it was designed to stop angry spouses from crossing out pages in a shared copy of Romeo and Juliet during a fight. Yes, seriously. It is a law that protects Shakespeare from your domestic drama. The government basically said, fight all you want, but leave the literature out of it. 23. In Greece, the calendar itself can be your biggest romantic enemy. There is a powerful superstition that getting married during a leap year is a recipe for disaster, guaranteeing that you will get divorced. While it isn't a written law, the cultural pressure is so strong that wedding venues lose a ton of business every 4 years. Couples are genuinely terrified of that extra day in February. Think about that. People believe your lifelong commitment could be cursed just because the calendar has a glitch. 24. In the United Arab Emirates, simply holding your spouse's hand in public can be a risky game. While holding hands is usually okay for married couples, any public display that looks too passionate, like a kiss on the cheek, can actually get you arrested for public indecency. The line is incredibly blurry and often depends entirely on who is watching you. What looks like a sweet moment in one neighborhood could be a criminal offense in another. It is a real-life game of romantic roulette where the price of losing is jail time. 25. Can you imagine having your wedding plans canceled by a literal king? In the tiny, rich nation of Monaco, citizens technically need the prince's approval to get married. It isn't just a formality. A notice of your marriage is posted publicly for 10 days. During that time, the prince's office can formally object and stop the whole thing. It means the biggest threat to your wedding isn't a jealous ex-boyfriend, but a sovereign ruler who just decided he wasn't feeling your vibe that week. 26. Let's talk about weird wedding night expectations. In London, there is a bizarre old rule that makes it illegal to have sex on a parked motorcycle. The law isn't about marriage specifically, but it certainly ruins the mood for any spontaneous biker romance. The city has a lot of strange rules, but this one stands out because it is so specific. You have to wonder what crazy event happened to make the city council say, "Okay, that is it. We have to ban motorcycle love immediately." 27. Dreaming of a beautiful wedding on a sandy beach or a mountaintop? Do not even think about it in England or Wales. For a marriage to be legally real there, it must take place inside a fixed structure with a solid, permanent roof. That is why you see so many British weddings happening in little gazebos. It is a legal trick to follow the rules. This law effectively bans open-air ceremonies, making one of the world's most romantic countries surprisingly strict. Meanwhile, in Las Vegas, you can get married in a drive-thru. 28. In Denmark, when married couples name their new baby, they don't get total freedom. They have to choose from a government-approved list of about 7,000 names. If you want something creative like banana or laser, you need special permission from both the government and the church. It is a bureaucratic wall for baby names. It is a system where your favorite name can be legally rejected by people who have never even met your kid. 29. If you are a widow in the city of Sarasota, Florida, you need to be very careful about your Sunday afternoon plans. An old law, which is technically still on the books, forbids a widow from parachuting on a Sunday. Any other day of the week is fine. Single women and married women can jump out of planes whenever they want. But for widows, Sunday skydiving is illegal. It is a law so strangely specific, it feels like it was written just to annoy one specific person a long time ago. 30. In Iran, a man can enter what is called a temporary marriage. It can last as short as a single hour or as long as 99 years, all written down in a contract that includes money. Supporters say it offers a religious way to have relationships, but critics argue it is often used as a legal loophole for short-term flings or dating. It is essentially a pay-as-you-go marriage, part serious religious institution, part subscription service for romance. 31. Let's end this batch with a head-scratcher from Tennessee. It is illegal to marry someone if they are officially declared insane. That sounds reasonable, but the law gets weird. If the sane spouse didn't know about the insanity, they can cancel the marriage. But if they knew their partner was legally insane and married them anyway, the marriage is valid and they are stuck. It is a law that basically says, hey, you knew what you were getting into, so no refunds now. 32. Some laws are crazy because of what they say. Others are crazy because of how they are written. Mississippi's law against having multiple wives reads less like a legal text and more like an angry sermon. It describes living with a second partner as adultery and fornication, and goes on a long, emotional rant about how it is a disgusting offense to public decency. It isn't just a law, it is a dramatic monologue. You can almost hear the person yelling while they wrote it. 33. Forget a diamond ring. In one English town called Hartlepool, the must-have wedding accessory is a whaler's harpoon. According to a fierce local tradition, to be considered a true local, one must be married over the harpoon. While you won't find this in any government law book, it is a piece of local identity so strong that it carries the weight of a real law. It is a beautiful proof of local culture, but also a total nightmare for wedding planners who have to find a giant spear. 34. Thinking of a quick, spontaneous wedding in Las Vegas? Be careful what you wish for. In Nevada, any marriage performed by someone pretending to be a minister or a judge is still legally real. As long as at least one person in the couple genuinely believed the Elvis impersonator was authorized to marry them, the state says, "Congratulations, it counts." It is a law that validates marriages based on good faith, meaning you could be legally bound for life just because you trusted a guy in a sequined jumpsuit and sunglasses to know the law. 35. In China, getting a divorce isn't as simple as signing some papers anymore. Since 2021, the government has forced a mandatory 30-day cool-down period for any couple filing for divorce. After you submit your application, you have to wait a full month. If you don't show up together at the end of that month to finalize it, the application is automatically thrown out. The government is essentially putting your breakup on hold, hoping you will just give up and stay together out of sheer laziness or because the paperwork is too annoying. 36. New York State has a very particular and honestly creepy definition of incest. Marrying your niece or nephew is, of course, illegal. However, the law says this only applies if you are the full sibling of their parent. If you are only a half-sibling to their parent, then legally, it is not considered incest, and you are free to get married. It is a bizarre genetic loophole that implies the state is totally fine with a little bit of incest, as long as you don't go all the way. It makes for some very awkward family reunions. 37. In Wichita, Kansas, the law basically gives terrible husbands a free pass. There is an old rule that says a man treating his mother-in-law badly is not a valid legal reason for his wife to divorce him. Just imagine how many awkward family dinners happen to make this a law. The city leaders essentially decided that being a total nightmare to your wife's mom is just part of the deal. It's a law that literally protects guys who are absolute jerks to their in-laws. 38. Let's talk about a truly terrifying argument waiting to happen. In Arizona, it is technically illegal to have a donkey sleeping in your bathtub after 7 p.m. This isn't a marriage law specifically, but imagine the domestic fight that must have inspired it. Honey, the donkey is dripping all over the bath mat again. It is a legal fossil from a time when your choice of livestock could cause a city crisis. It is the perfect example of household chaos turning into actual government legislation. 39. In Michigan, a wife technically cannot cut her own hair without her husband's permission. This is one of those dusty laws from a long time ago that was never officially removed. It comes from old rules where a woman's body and property legally belong to her husband. While you won't see police raiding hair salons to check for permission slips today, it is a baffling legal ghost that still exists on the books. It reminds us of a time when getting a haircut required a full marital negotiation and a signed note. 40. In Indonesia, the punishment for looking at your spouse with lust can be extreme. Okay, this is a bit of a viral exaggeration, but the truth is still wild. The country has strict anti-pornography laws that are incredibly broad. They ban any content of lasciviousness or exploitation. In its most extreme interpretation by conservative groups, this could theoretically include sending a flirty or lustful text to your own spouse. It turns private flirting into a potential public crime, meaning you have to be careful about what emojis you send. 41. Let's travel back to 1700s England, where a woman's makeup bag was considered a weapon of witchcraft. A law stated that any woman who used scents, paints, artificial teeth, or high heels to seduce a man into marriage was in big trouble. The marriage could be canceled, and she could be tried for witchcraft. It was the original catfishing scandal, only instead of just getting blocked on social media, you could actually get burned at the stake or thrown in prison just for wearing lipstick and heels. 42. Ever gotten married on a dare? If you did it in Delaware, the state actually has your back. Getting married as a jest or a dare is one of the official legal reasons for an annulment. There is no waiting period or complicated divorce process. You just have to prove to a judge that the entire sacred union was a joke that went way too far. It is a legal escape hatch designed specifically for life's most idiotic decisions, saving you from a hangover that lasts a lifetime. 43. The ultimate long-distance relationship, getting married in Montana, where neither of you even has to be in the state. Welcome to the double proxy marriage, the only one of its kind in the US. You and your partner could be on opposite sides of the world, while two complete strangers stand in for you in a Montana courthouse and legally bind you for life. It is the perfect solution for busy people, extreme introverts, or maybe international spies who can't risk being seen in the same room together. 44. If you are a man in Truro, Massachusetts, an old law says that before you can get married, you must prove you can provide. How? By going on a hunt. But you aren't hunting a bear or a deer for meat. To prove your manhood, you must kill either 6 blackbirds or 3 crows. It is a bizarre, old-fashioned ritual that turns the sacred act of marriage into a weird fetch quest for killing birds. Imagine trying to explain that requirement to your future in-laws today. 45. In the UK, it is technically an act of high treason for a common person to sleep with a member of the royal family. An old law from 1351 makes it a capital offense to have an affair with the monarch's spouse or eldest daughter. While they don't use the death penalty for this anymore, the law itself is still active. This means that if you marry into the royal family, your partner's faithfulness isn't just a personal issue, it is protected by one of the most severe laws in the nation's history. 46. While some places have weird rules for getting married, 2 places make it almost impossible to get out of one. The Philippines and Vatican City are the only sovereign states on Earth where divorce is completely illegal. In the Philippines, your only hope is a long, expensive, and painful annulment process where you must prove the marriage was fake or invalid from the start. For millions of people there, till death do us part isn't just a romantic vow, it is an inescapable legal sentence. 47. Let's head to Louisiana, which uses a unique legal system based on old French codes. This led to some very odd marriage rules. For a long time, the husband was legally the head and master of the house, giving him the sole power to sell the family home without his wife's permission. While this has been fixed, pieces of this old system still exist in property laws, creating a modern headache. It serves as a reminder of a time when a wife could lose her house just because her husband made a bad deal. 48. In India, a Hindu man who converts to Islam just to marry a second wife without divorcing his first can go to jail. This sounds simple, but it fixed a specific legal trick people were using. Since Hindu law requires you to have only one wife, but Islamic law allows up to 4, some men were trying to switch religions just to get around the rules. The Supreme Court of India stepped in and said, "Nice try, but you can't use religion as a loophole for cheating on your spouse." 1. In Maryland, the state officially prohibits psychics from weaponizing their powers against your marriage. A state law makes it illegal for anyone claiming to be a fortune teller to accept money, to compel one spouse to love or hate the other. Apparently, the government saw enough people paying psychics to cast separation spells that they had to step in. It's the state's official stance against scams where someone tells you your husband's aura is toxic just to get another $50. 2. In Mississippi, a broken heart can lead to an actual court date. It's one of the few states that still allows lawsuits for breach of promise to marry. If a partner promises to marry you and then bails, you can sue them for damages beyond just the ring. We're talking emotional distress, financial loss, and even damage to your public reputation. It's the ultimate legal weapon for the jilted lover, turning a tearful breakup into a potentially lucrative and very public legal battle. 3. That classic movie trope of waking up married in Vegas with no memory of the night has a real legal foundation in Colorado. The law allows for an annulment if one or both parties were so intoxicated during the ceremony that they were incapable of consenting. It's a legal acknowledgement that some I-dos are fueled by tequila rather than true love. The state basically offers a legal undo button for decisions made at 3 in the morning when the open bar was too tempting. 4. Medieval Germany had the most metal solution to marital disputes: trial by combat. A 15th century fencing manual details the official rules for a husband and wife to legally fight it out. To keep it fair, the man stood in a 3-foot-deep hole with one hand tied behind his back, while the woman was armed with a cloth-wrapped rock. This wasn't a joke. It was a legally sanctioned method of conflict resolution. Forget passive-aggressive notes. We're talking about state-approved spousal combat to decide who was actually right. 5. In France, "Till death do us part" is treated more like a suggestion. Under extraordinary circumstances, you can legally marry a dead person. This posthumous marriage law was enacted after a 1959 dam burst killed over 400 people, including a man whose fiancé already had her wedding application ready. Moved by her plea, the government allowed the union to proceed. Today, it still requires approval from the President of France, proving that in Paris, not even mortality is a valid legal excuse to get out of a wedding. 6. Ancient Rome had a built-in, legally mandated escape hatch for marriage. Under one form of law, a husband gained complete legal control over his wife and her property after 1 year. But there was a loophole called the trinoctium. If the wife left her husband's house for 3 consecutive nights annually, the legal clock reset to 0. This wasn't a trial separation, it was a brilliant maneuver. A woman could pack her bags, say, "See you in 3 days," and legally maintain her independence and her finances. It was the world's first prenuptial agreement requiring a mandatory vacation. 7. In ancient Wales, the law was obsessed with quantifying heartbreak in terms of livestock. If a man broke off an engagement, he owed his former fiancée specific payments. He owed her £1 for a kiss and £2 if the engagement was fully established. But the most absurd part? He legally owed her 1 cow for every year they were engaged, up to a maximum of 4 cows. It's the only legal system where a broken heart was explicitly soothed by walking away with a small, confused herd of cattle. 8. In 19th century Alabama, marriage annulment grounds were incredibly specific. A man could legally annul his marriage if he discovered his wife had a wooden leg and didn't disclose it beforehand. This was legally classified as fraud. It wasn't about the disability itself, but the deception. Picture the scene. A man storming into a lawyer's office, outraged not by infidelity or secrets, but by an undisclosed prosthetic limb. It gives a whole new meaning to having cold feet before the wedding. 9. In England, a marital argument could escalate into a public parade of shame called the Skimmington Ride. This was a legally tolerated form of mob justice used to punish a husband deemed henpecked or dominated by his wife. The community would force the man to ride backward on a donkey while neighbors followed him banging pots and pans. It was the ultimate social policing, where your private marital squabbles earned you a starring role in the community theater production of your own personal failure. 10. Living together before marriage in Florida? You're technically a criminal. It's still a second-degree misdemeanor for an unmarried couple to lewdly and lasciviously cohabitate. While almost never enforced, the law remains active on the books. Millions of Floridians break the law just by sharing a home and a lease with their partner. Imagine getting a ticket not for speeding, but for splitting the rent without a marriage certificate. It's the state's way of saying, "We see you playing house, and we don't approve." 11. Lying on your dating profile in South Carolina could technically make you a criminal. A state law prohibits using a fictitious name or impersonating someone else online for the purpose of intimidation or harassment. While intended for more serious cybercrimes, the broad wording means that using a 10-year-old photo or claiming to be a tech mogul while you're actually unemployed could theoretically land you in legal hot water. You aren't just a catfish. In the eyes of the Palmetto State, you might be a misdemeanor waiting to happen. 12. If you're unhappily married in the Philippines, your only legal exit strategy is basically moving to another country. Outside of Vatican City, the Philippines is the only nation on earth where divorce is completely illegal. You can fight for a civil annulment, but those are notoriously expensive, can take years to process, and require you to prove the marriage was invalid from the very first second. For millions, a marriage certificate isn't just a document. It's a lifelong, legally unbreakable contract whether the love is there or not. 13. In Delaware, it is strictly illegal to get married on a dare. The state's legal code explicitly prohibits any marriage entered into as a jest or dare. This implies that at some point, enough people were treating the altar like a high-stakes drinking game that the legislature had to intervene. It's the only place in America where, "I bet you won't do it," is legally recognized as a valid reason to void a marriage contract. Apparently, in Delaware, they prefer their impulsive decisions to stay at the blackjack table. 14. Colorado law effectively criminalized the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale. An old statute makes it illegal for a man to kiss a woman while she is asleep. While this sounds like common-sense consent, the fact that a specific law had to be written suggests that men were taking the Prince Charming approach far too literally. It's a law that basically tells would-be romantics that if she's catching Z's, your true love's kiss, is actually a third-degree misdemeanor. 15. In South Carolina, a heated lover's quarrel on a public sidewalk can escalate into a state offense in seconds. It is a misdemeanor to use profane or obscene language in public within earshot of a woman. This means the moment an F-bomb slips out during an argument about who forgot to buy milk, you've crossed the line into criminal territory. It gives a police officer the legal right to shut down your relationship drama with a ticket for unlawful indignation. 16. The ordeal of the bitter water. From the Old Testament was the most intense fidelity test ever codified. If a husband suspected his wife of cheating but had zero proof, he could bring her to a priest who would mix holy water with dust from the temple floor and ink from a curse. The woman had to drink this bitter water. If she was innocent, she stayed healthy. If she was guilty, the text says her body would swell painfully. It was a high-stakes, ritualistic lie detector test with a terrifyingly supernatural edge. 17. In ancient Sparta, the first step of marriage was a literal kidnapping. The ritual involved the man physically abducting his bride-to-be from her family home in the dead of night. She would then have her head shaved and be dressed in men's clothing to wait for her new husband. This wasn't a crime. It was the legally and socially accepted way to start a family. Suddenly, the modern anxiety of a bad Tinder date or an awkward dinner doesn't seem so bad compared to being shoved in a sack and given a buzz cut. 18. Before no-fault divorce existed, Massachusetts had a very specific way to dump your spouse: the shaker clause. If your partner joined a religious sect that believed marriage was obsolete and refused to live with you as a result, like the celibate Shakers, you were legally entitled to an annulment. The state basically ruled that if your spouse chose a life of communal living and zero sex over you, you had a legal right to get out of the contract and find someone who actually wanted to be married. 19. Planning a romantic serenade in Louisiana? You better have some serious vocal talent. An old law made it illegal to disturb the peace by singing loudly at night, with a specific focus on serenading. This gave the police the legal authority to shut down a suitor if his voice sounded more like a dying cat than a romantic crooner. It's a law that protects the public from the auditory assault of off-key love songs, turning a failed romantic gesture into a potential night in a jail cell. 20. In colonial Truro, Massachusetts, getting married required a very specific and very grim proof of skill. Before a man could be granted a marriage license, he was legally obligated to kill either 6 blackbirds or 3 crows. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a prerequisite. Forget buying a diamond ring or asking for a blessing. The ultimate romantic gesture was presenting the town clerk with a pile of dead birds to prove you were a capable provider. It was the government's way of ensuring you weren't just a lover, but an effective avian hitman. 21. In North Carolina, you can legally sue the person who ruined your marriage for cash. It's called an alienation of affection lawsuit, and it's not some dusty old relic. These cases are still won today. This law allows a jilted spouse to sue the other man or other woman for monetary damages. You aren't just filing for divorce, you are literally suing the romantic villain of your life story for theft. One man was famously awarded $750,000 after his wife's affair. It's the only legal arena where "he stole my girl" is a legitimate and potentially million-dollar legal argument. 22. In ancient Rome, being single wasn't a lifestyle choice, it was a taxable offense. Emperor Augustus, concerned that the upper class wasn't reproducing fast enough, enacted the Julian laws, which included a literal bachelor tax. If you were a man of marriageable age and still flying solo, the government hit you with a special financial penalty. Even worse, you were legally barred from receiving inheritances from anyone outside your immediate family. It was the state's way of saying, find a wife and have some kids, or we'll make sure you stay both poor and lonely. 23. In Utah, you are legally allowed to marry your first cousin, but only if the government is sure you won't be having any kids. The law states the marriage is valid only if both parties are at least 65 years old. If you're younger, say 55, you can still pull it off, but only if a court certifies that at least one of you is sterile. It's incredibly specific. A legislative committee actually sat down and decided that cousin marriage is totally fine, but only after your reproductive warranty has officially expired. 24. Montana is the only place in America where you can get married without actually showing up to your own wedding. This is called a double proxy marriage. You can have a stand-in represent you, and your partner can do the same. Theoretically, 2 people who have never even met could be legally wed in a Montana courthouse, while one is climbing Everest and the other is stationed on an oil rig. It is the world capital of extreme long-distance commitment, allowing you to outsource your "I do" to a complete stranger. 25. Before the era of no-fault divorce, you needed a scandalous reason to end a marriage. In many states, one of the most bizarre grounds was proving your spouse had a loathsome disease they hid from you. While this sounds like it's about serious medical issues, the legal language was so vague that lawyers argued everything from severe acne to chronic bad breath was loathsome, enough to void the contract. It was a law that allowed you to legally dump your partner simply because you found their physical state to be, in professional legal terms, totally gross. 26. If you're looking for a blunt legal exit in New Hampshire, the state offers a very unique reason for divorce. You can legally dissolve your marriage if your spouse is, and this is the actual legal term, an idiot or a lunatic. There's no need for a complex psychological evaluation or years of therapy. The law suggests you can just walk into a courtroom and argue, Your Honor, my husband is, legally speaking, a complete and utter moron. It's a refreshingly honest, if incredibly harsh approach to irreconcilable differences. 27. Let's head to the Viking Age, where your choice of clothing could cost you your marriage. According to ancient Icelandic law, a woman had the legal right to divorce her husband instantly if he wore a shirt with a neckline low enough to show his chest. This wasn't just a fashion critique. Showing too much man cleavage was considered unmanly and was a legitimate legal ground for separation. Imagine a fierce Viking raider coming home from a successful voyage, only to find his marriage dissolved because his tunic was deemed too provocative. 28. In New York, if your spouse pulls a literal vanishing act, the law has a practical, albeit grim, solution. It's called an Enoch Arden divorce. If your partner has been missing for 5 consecutive years with no explanation and you genuinely believe they're dead, you can petition a court to dissolve the marriage. This allows you to move on and remarry without being charged with bigamy if they ever decide to show back up. It's a legal off-ramp for relationships that end not with a fight, but with a mysterious silence. 29. In colonial Virginia, taking a relationship to the next level without a marriage license could lead to a public nightmare. If a man and woman had a child out of wedlock, it wasn't just a social scandal, it was a crime punishable by public whipping. Court records from the era are filled with orders for couples to be taken to the public post and lashed for the crime of fornication. It's a dark reminder of a time when the consequence for an unplanned pregnancy was state-mandated, violently enforced public humiliation. 30. Ancient Ireland had a brilliant way of monetizing marital rudeness. Under the Bran laws, if a husband insulted his wife in public and brought a blush to her cheek, he was legally required to pay her a fine. This wasn't a suggestion for an apology. It was a mandatory penalty, and the amount often depended on her social rank. It's the only legal system in history that effectively turned a swear jar into a state law, where a husband's big mouth would cost him a sheep or a sack of grain. 31. Planning a romantic walk in Carmel by the Sea, California? You better leave the stilettos at home. This town has an ordinance that makes it illegal to wear high heels over 2 inches tall without a special permit from City Hall. The law was actually created to protect the city from lawsuits over people tripping on uneven pavement. But imagine being on a perfect first date and getting pulled over by a cop, not for speeding, but because your shoes are legally considered a public safety hazard. 32. If you want to get married with zero bureaucratic fluff, Pennsylvania is your spot. Thanks to its Quaker roots, the state recognizes self-uniting marriages. You don't need a priest, a judge, or a licensed officiant to say the words. You just show up at the courthouse with 2 witnesses, sign the paperwork, and declare yourselves married. The state essentially says, if you two are sure and you've got 2 friends to vouch for you, we don't need to get involved. It's the ultimate DIY wedding. 33. If you get an engagement ring in California, don't take too long to plan the party. A marriage license in the Golden State is only valid for 90 days. If you don't pull the trigger and get married within that window, the license expires and you have to start the entire process over again. It's the state's way of putting a ticking clock on your romance. It turns getting cold feet into a race against the calendar, adding a layer of bureaucratic stress to your engagement. 34. In 18th century England, if you couldn't afford a proper legal divorce, there was a much darker, unofficial option: wife selling. A husband would lead his wife to the public market, sometimes with a ribbon or a halter around her neck, and literally auction her off to the highest bidder. While not technically legal, it was a widely accepted custom reported in local newspapers as a legitimate way to end a marriage. It's a grim reminder that before conscious uncoupling was a thing, there was public liquidation. 35. In ancient Germanic cultures, the wedding night ended with a legally mandated transaction called the Morgengabe, or morning gift. This wasn't just a romantic token. The husband was required to give his new wife money or property the morning after the marriage was consummated. Most importantly, this gift remained her personal property, completely outside her husband's control, to provide for her future financial security. It was a remarkably pragmatic law that essentially required a morning-after payout to prove his commitment was real. 36. Colonial New England practiced a courtship ritual called bundling that was the ultimate test of self-control. Unmarried couples were allowed to spend the night in the same bed, but there was a massive wooden board placed between them. Often, they were even sewn into individual sacks up to their necks. It was the 18th century version of Netflix and chill, except with zero chill and a heavy emphasis on splinters. It allowed for intimacy while ensuring the government and the parents remained perfectly satisfied with your chastity. 37. One of the oldest relationship laws in history is the levirate marriage, famously found in the Old Testament. The rule was brutally mandatory. If a man died childless, his brother was legally obligated to marry the widow. This wasn't a choice. It was a hereditary responsibility to keep the family line going. Imagine the most awkward family reunion imaginable, which then legally lasts for the rest of your life. In this system, you didn't just inherit your brother's property, you inherited his wife. 38. For centuries, Gretna Green, a tiny Scottish village, was the Las Vegas of its time. English law required anyone under 21 to have parental consent to marry, but in Scotland, the age limit was just 16. Desperate young couples would race across the border, often with angry fathers in hot pursuit. The first person they'd find who could legally wed them was the village blacksmith, who would perform the ceremony over his anvil. It was a marriage literally forged in fire and teenage rebellion. 39. 17th century France featured a legal nightmare called the trial by Congress. If a wife accused her husband of being unable to consummate the marriage, the court wouldn't just take her word for it. They would order the husband to prove his abilities in front of a panel of judges, doctors, and legal experts. This was a high-stakes, state-mandated performance under the most awkward pressure imaginable. It remains the only time in history where the key evidence in a court case had to be produced, on demand, in a room full of strangers. 40. Arkansas has a very specific no-snitch, no-divorce rule called corroboration. You can't just walk into court and claim your spouse was a jerk. The law requires a third-party witness to testify and back up your story. Your word alone is legally worthless. This turns every divorce into a bizarre legal Three's Company situation, where you essentially have to drag a neighbor or a friend into your most private drama just to convince the judge that your marriage is actually over. 41. China's one-child policy created the most high-pressure dating market in human history. Due to a cultural preference for sons, the policy led to a massive gender imbalance with tens of millions more men than women. This created a generation of bare branches, men statistically destined to never find a wife. It has driven bride prices to astronomical levels, with families demanding cars and downtown apartments just to consider a proposal. It's a terrifying example of how government policy turns the simple act of finding a partner into a brutal, nationwide economic cage match. 42. Ancient Irish law, known as the Brehon Laws, gave a wife the absolute legal right to divorce her husband if he became too fat. This wasn't about shallow vanity. The law viewed excessive weight as a sign of neglect and an inability to fulfill his duties to the tribe and the household. It was a legally sanctioned fitness review for your marriage, where a man could be fired from his role as a husband for failing to maintain his fighting weight. 43. Let's discuss history's least romantic wedding night, courtesy of the Visigothic Code in early medieval Spain. To ensure a marriage was legally valid, the law required official witnesses to oversee the beginning of the honeymoon. After the feast, a group of respectable neighbors would escort the newlyweds directly to their bedroom door. They didn't stay for the show, but they legally witnessed the couple entering the chamber together for the night. This wasn't a party. It was a legal proceeding. It created sworn witnesses who could later testify in court that the marriage was finalized. Your marriage literally started with a committee meeting right outside the bedroom door. 44. France might be the land of romance, but it's also the land of being on time. Since 1910, it has been technically illegal to kiss on a train platform. The law wasn't passed because of prudishness, but because long, dramatic farewell kisses were causing massive delays for the national railway system. You can kiss all you want in the taxi, but once you're on the platform, the government demands that your passion take a back seat to the train schedule. 45. In North Carolina, being a player can technically land you in the state penitentiary. It is a Class G felony to seduce an innocent and virtuous woman using deception or false promises. To win the case, the prosecution actually has to legally establish the victim's virtue before the act. It's a bizarre 19th century law that treats a bad breakup and a few lies like a major felony, reminding everyone that in the Tar Heel state, your game better be honest. 46. In Old English law, a marriage proposal was treated with the same weight as a corporate merger. The moment a man proposed and a woman said yes, they were considered pre-contracted. Breaking it off wasn't just socially rude, it was a breach of contract that could be punished by the church. This meant a casually whispered, "Maybe we should get married," after a few drinks could become a legally binding nightmare. It was the historical equivalent of accidentally signing a mortgage during a first date. 47. For much of the 20th century, Michigan treated professional matchmakers like common criminals. Under the Marriage Brokerage Act, taking money to arrange a marriage was a misdemeanor. The state's position was that love should be a happy accident, not a brokered commercial transaction. This law technically made the business model of every modern dating app illegal, turning every professional wingman and digital algorithm into a potential public enemy in the eyes of the law. 48. The Puritans in New England invented the original secure messaging app, but it was made of wood. It was called a courting stick, a hollow tube about 8 feet long. To maintain propriety, a young couple had to sit on opposite sides of the room while their parents watched. They would whisper into one end of the tube while the other listened, allowing for private conversation while staying physically separated. It's the only time in history where romance was transmitted via a giant state-approved listening straw. From crocodile brides to state-mandated silence, it's clear the government is the ultimate uninvited third wheel in your relationship. These laws prove that happily ever after usually comes with a massive stack of bizarre fine print. Which of these rules made you want to stay single forever? Share your thoughts below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's strangest realities. Now, go tell your partner you love them before the law changes its mind.